We've been learning a lot of interesting insights and trends in terms of how the overall digital platforms and ecosystems around it are driving growth and momentum for global enterprises, right? The data point that Pari kind of talked about in the morning session was that 85% of the global enterprises are already investing into building digital platforms, right? And the other interesting data point was, and it was very revealing, was the fact that 30% of these companies have started focusing aggressively on building platforms and supporting ecosystems in just the last 2 years, right? So there's a lot of excitement and momentum in the market, and what we want to do today is, while building platforms is a given, how do you sustain, manage, evolve, and derive value and outcomes on the platforms by tapping into ecosystem is something that we would like to learn from people who have been there, done it, who have seen the journey over the ages, and we'll try and understand what does it take to build successful digital ecosystems around the platform, right? So probably I'll get started with you, Bobby, and we'll go across the podium. If you could give a little bit of your background in terms of the professional experience you've had so far, and then take us back in time in terms of when was this need of building platforms and ecosystem was really realized at your organization, and then the journey thereof in a brief way, if you could talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I'm Bobby Soni. I'm the Chief Solutions and Services Officer at Hitachi Vantara. What that really means is we are responsible for building digital solutions for our customers and across our ecosystem. So I engage directly with our customers across the world. And what is interesting about Hitachi Vantara is we're part of Hitachi Corporation, which is the $90 billion industrial conglomerate. So we have a very unique situation where we have an industrial conglomerate with a business that spans many, many sectors. So we make the bullet trains, we build earth movers, we build MRI machines. So over 100 years of deep OT knowledge. But that OT knowledge is like in most industries is locked up, right? So it's sort of the IP and the knowledge and the know-how is locked up in that domain. So the opportunity here is to unlock, commercialize, and monetize those assets. So that's the exciting journey we're on. Quick background, I mean, my background is really primarily around systems integration and technology, sort of kind of been involved in the waves that have come over the last 2-3 decades, from client server to hosting, to ASP, to cloud, to BPM, to AI/ML. So one thing we all know very well, living in the Valley, what's old is new again.
Right.
So there's, whatever we used to do is now back again, but it's back in a much better form because of the capabilities and the technology and the experience over the last couple of decades.
Right. So definitely old is the new, the new, and then simple is the new normal, as Pari mentioned in the presentation in the morning. Quickly turning to you, Susheela, you are in a pretty fascinating industry, pretty fascinating sort of high growth, startup-ish kind of an environment. What does it, from your perspective, what is this buzz around platform ecosystems and digital ecosystems surrounding those? Take us back in the journey in terms of how Gigster was set up and how far have you come along this journey?
Yeah, great question. Well, I'm the head of strategy at Gigster, and Gigster is an Andreessen-backed company that helps large enterprises, Fortune 1000 mostly, companies accelerate their digital transformation, and we do it at startup speed. We have a disruptive model that is based on a fixed fee model that leverages a global talent network of freelancers. And that's really what enables us to be able to deliver this different model at such a rapid pace, is leveraging this talent network, which I think we've been talking about all morning, the scarcity of talent and the scarcity of resources. We're able to leverage that network because what we offer our freelancers is the ability to work anywhere that they want. They can choose their work environment. They can choose the projects that they work on, so really working on projects that really inspire them. And they're paid based on outcomes. and not just based on hourly rates. So the most talented people can finish things extremely quickly, and those are the folks that we tap into.
How big is the community that you have right now?
So our community of network, our network is over 500, and that includes developers, architects, designers, product managers, project managers. And we're able to have really deep expertise in some of the latest technologies like AI and ML. That's a lot of the projects we're working on right now. We can really spin up teams extremely quickly. In fact, we did a project for an oil and gas company where we were able to spin up a project team in 4 days that had 2 of the best AI experts and data scientists.
Perfect. Perfect. So I think Bobby talked about unlocking value from the capabilities and domain. You really touched upon the fact that communities that you build, external or internal, are important to derive outcomes. Turning to you, Siddhartha, you represent a very large tech giant, right? How has Oracle and you in specific have seen the evolution of the digital ecosystems being created at this point?
Sure, and as was mentioned, I just landed from Singapore and shaved in the airport, got here. So if you think he's sounding incoherent, you know why that is the case. So I run product management and strategy across our platform as a service portfolio, which includes application development, integration, security, management from the cloud, analytics, et cetera. And in terms of the evolution that we've gone through, obviously the first phase was let's deliver all our software as services, but not just take our on-prem software and enable them to be delivered as cloud services, but actually build those cloud services from the ground up. But now the most current evolution of that platform, and I'll get to the digital ecosystem part of it, is how we're embedding artificial intelligence into every one of our cloud services. Because if you ask yourself how many of you are machine learning experts, or how many people out there are machine learning experts, there'll be very few hands that actually go up. And so our focus has become how do you democratize AI through embedding it in each of our cloud services. And so for example, for the database, making sure that you have an autonomous database. Larry Ellison was on the board of Tesla, so I'm assuming that's where the autonomous sort of verbiage came from. But how do you make sure that people don't have to operate the database? People don't have to define indexes. People don't have to tune queries, that we will be able to do that by ourselves. Or, for example, in integration, be able to have intelligent integrations that you don't have to write code. And we're actually recommending how do you integrate one app to another app. And in terms of the ecosystem, what we're doing is, one, internally, we are providing this platform to all our SaaS applications. So the next generation of user experience, for example, for all our SaaS applications is digital assistants and chatbots that uses a lot of AI. So they're just using our platform, or integration, they're just using our platform. And then there's the external ecosystem. And in the external ecosystem, obviously developers are really, really important. And so we're making sure that we're giving them a platform to build AI-based applications themselves. But for the SIs and for the ISVs, we're giving them the platform with embedded intelligence in it so they can more rapidly build those digital transformation use cases. Absolutely. Work more focused on the industry side of it, where we're thinking more horizontally. So that's been sort of the evolution for Oracle in terms of, we're a platform company, and we think of it that way. So that's the evolution.
It's fairly interesting because one of the data points that Pari again touched upon in the morning is the fact that if you look at Silicon Valley, there are only about 13,000 people working on platform and platform engineering. It's a very small pool of talents, getting a lot more distributed. There are a lot of, in fact, the other data point was the fact that most of the platform innovations are actually not happening in the US. They're happening elsewhere in the world, in China, in India, in Latin America, and so on and so forth, right? So how do you, and we'll come to that in a quick moment, but I quickly want to get Ravi's perspective. Like Siddhartha, you also represent a very old company who's gone through multiple transformations, and today you've become a lot more sexier than what you were maybe a few years ago, right?
Sure.
How has platforms and ecosystems contributed to that journey, Ravi, in your organization?
Great question. Thank you for that, and thank you for having me here. I think about 35 years back, when Parametric Technology Corporation was founded, till about 10 years back, we were a very successful CAD and a PLM company. And that worked very well for us. We were on a roll. We realized that in order for us to become more relevant in the digital age and become part of the so-called the platformization, if you will, we were missing very clear elements. And that's when we actually went to the board, got approval to go make an investment of about $700 million to go acquire some of these assets that we think were missing in our organization strategy and go build the unique platform that we have today. So we acquired Kepware, we acquired ThingWorks, we acquired Core Light Analytics. I think Pari was mentioning some of that. And the last one that we did was Vuforia from Qualcomm. To essentially complete our AR stack. So today, we speak about full stack from a developer standpoint, and one is the full stack from a platform standpoint. So that was a journey that we went through, and that was a big journey for the company that really has never made significant acquisitions. The second aspect of our journey was when our company had to come to terms with making a leap into subscription. A company that has been perpetual forever for 25, 30 years and suddenly has, realizes that the market valuations and what the street expects is a subscription model. It's taken us about 4 years to get there. So we started 2015 or so, and we're up upwards of 80% and going towards 100% very rapidly. But that was a big journey and a switch and a change for us. And you kind of go through a chasm of value of death, as they call it, because your perpetual bookings suddenly now start becoming subscription. That's been a roller coaster, literally from a value of death to where we are. So those were two significant changes our company went through, and it's been a fun journey. And today, the valuations that you see today are part of the reason why the market rates are so high in platform, subscription, and all 9 yards. So I want to take one term that you said sexy, right? So we think in our world, IoT is the sex and AR is the sizzle. So we have the sex and the sizzle.
Interesting. So I think it's very unique perspectives that all of you have shared. Bobby talked about data and value. You talked about external ecosystems and developers. You talked about AI and automation. And you talked about buying capabilities from outside and sort of redefining the way you think of business models. The fundamental problem I have, and most of the people in the room have, is how do you orchestrate all of it, right? They are all uniquely important, but when put in place in an aggregate way, it becomes a massive task for any organization to deal with. Siddhartha, you've been part of this journey for several years. Tell us how should all of us in the room and many others outside should think about orchestrating these four elements to derive the right outcomes from the digital ecosystems?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing is trying to think about what are the business use cases that you want to deliver to, and helping the customers try and identify what are those digital transformation use cases, and in which industries or which horizontal, like HR versus sales versus service versus marketing. And once you have that insight, then you can say, okay, what do I need to build in my platform such that it enables as intelligent capability as possible to get those digital use cases or transformation use cases delivered easily, right? For example, PTC talked about IoT. We'd actually built an IoT platform. And about 3 years ago, we realized that no one's coming to that IoT platform. And it wasn't because the platform wasn't great. It's because no one wanted to build applications on top of it. If you look at VP of service or VP of manufacturing, they don't have development teams that are going to build applications on top of a IoT platform.
Right.
So we actually then evolved to say we're going to deliver SaaS applications on top of that IoT platform, so that we had production line monitoring, fleet monitoring, asset monitoring, et cetera, as SaaS applications. And now you think about blockchain as a technology. Again, what we're finding is that people they haven't figured out what their use cases are for blockchain. So they're thinking technology up, and we're trying to help them say, no, first figure out the use cases. So now what we've done is we've taken our IoT capabilities and our blockchain capabilities and said we're going to deliver SaaS applications that give you intelligent track and trace, that give you intelligent cold chain, that give you all of these lot lineage and provenance, which uses IoT and it uses blockchain and it uses intelligence, and so you're getting to the business use case. So I think that's one of the key things. And then partners have to think about, okay, if a platform vendor is delivering this kind of capability out of the box as SaaS, where is it that they add value, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of value that is added because the business process, we can't think of every business process that is out there for a particular use case, and they can bring in that customer-specific use case and embed it or add to that from the SaaS side.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, because when I look at Hitachi and the background they have and the fact that IoT is now, PTC is now partnering with Rockwell, which is where the domain and capabilities kind of comes in. Oracle is a big company and you have access to thousands and thousands of enterprise customers, which probably give you the customer insight that you need. But when I look at most of the other fast growing, rapidly scaling or wanting to scale platforms, they kind of miss out on that capability part or the domain part, right? So as you think of advising to those companies, what should be their strategy to truly become platform centric and not lose out because they perhaps don't have the domain and the capabilities that are required to build those very specific services? And in fact, Amit in his morning keynote was exactly emphasizing on that part, the fact that GE Healthcare had to take, roll up their own sleeves and build their platform and not think of platform as let's go to Azure and let's go to Oracle and build it, right? They build it end to end on their own, right? So how should companies think about it, and where do you think the role of the tech ecosystem comes in? Where are the handoffs that you need to look at as companies think of the platform journey?
Are you asking me again?
Yeah.
I don't want to monopolize.
I
mean, I think that any company, they should have their perspective, what differentiates them.
Right.
And in order to differentiate yourself, you have to know either a domain or an industry that you're going to deliver, and even in an industry, a specific use case that you're going to make it so simple that people can just use that use case, right? So I think it doesn't, yes, we get a lot of input from our customers, but I've been at startups also.
Right.
And that's the most important thing, is going out and identifying from the ecosystem out there, saying, if I were to deliver this, is this a business challenge for you? And how much would you be willing to pay for that business challenge? I mean, that has to be like a fundamental requirement before you go build anything. So you have to be able to define what is your differentiation, and the more you can do it at the business use case level as opposed to at the technology level, the better off you are.
Right. So Susheela, from your point of view, because you've been working with companies who've been wanting to get down that path of digital transformation and build ecosystems in turn, what has been your observation?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. It's starting with what is the business impact? What's the outcome we want to have? Not here's this technology,
right,
this cool thing that we should learn about and do something with because everybody else is. And so, Siddhartha, I think you're absolutely right. What we find is a lot of companies where the development work and the push is coming from a side team like an innovation team or a lab, the lab. Those projects fail a lot of the time because it's really more focusing on the technology and not really thinking through and talking with and getting buy-in from the business leaders that this is the outcome, this is the impact we want to have. And so it's really critical to get that top level input, from the CEO, from the C-suite, to really have them behind the project and the effort,
right,
and have it really aligned with what are the goals in the short term and the goals in the long term. In fact, a lot of times we have passed on projects where the leadership isn't really aligned, because what we find is it's just a one and done project. It sits on the shelf. It doesn't have true outcomes and impact, and so that, I think you're absolutely right, Siddhartha, you really need to have that push from the top.
I think one of the things Pari touched upon in his presentation was also the fact that customer insight, as you think of platforms and ecosystem, is very important. And one of the ways you can get customer insight is by having customers co-invest into the platform journey. Mm-hmm. From a Hitachi perspective, how easy or not so easy has that been in terms of getting customers aligned? Because see, the problem there is there are so many competing priorities that customers have.
Right.
There's so many evolving technologies that have the potential to fundamentally change the way businesses are done. So how do you make customers be part of that journey and make them invest into co-creation of something like this?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a mission critical question, right? Because the co-creation it has to be in your DNA. So co-creation will not happen accidentally, right? So you have to have a very programmatic and very well thought out. So co-creation at a high level, everybody will say, yeah, absolutely, that makes sense. I want to co-create with customers. But I think the God's in the details. So you have to have, kind of your platform, security, IP, organizational structure. So when you get into it, there is a number of details around co-creation, right? So as an example, if someone in your organization goes to a customer and selects them as a lighthouse customer, and your legal department follows up with a 100-page contract, co-creation dies before it's begun. Right? That's one example. So you have to really think about it as part of your operating model. And at Hitachi, that's kind of what we are, because our CEO at Hitachi, whenever he gets on a stage, whether it's in Davos or anywhere, the first or second thing he talks about is co-creation. So we have a series of what we call lighthouse customers that help us co-create. And AI, ML are vehicles, are modalities that help, but really what they help solve is the use case or the business problem. And that business problem is most deeply understood by customers. Right. So to us, co-creation is both external and internal, because we have front BUs that operate these industries, and then we have customers outside them. So we approach it in a very systematic way.
Got it. Yeah. Ravi, from your perspective, and while Bobby talked about the customer side of the story, you represent a lot of GSI focus areas for PTC, right? Which is really the external partner ecosystem. How do you drive co-creation with that side of the house? And what are some of the challenges you've faced as you've enabled that community to co-create as you're evolving your own platform and you're bringing different partners like Rockwell onto the platform? How has that part of the equation of the partner side of the house transformed in the last several years?
Sure, thank you. So we run our global system integrators and what we call as the high value management consulting business, which includes, Zinnov is one of those management consulting firms that we work with besides McKinsey and Boston Consulting. And then we've got actually two partners here, Accenture and Wipro in room, which are part of our GSI team. About 2.5 years back, when we looked at our ecosystem, we had 115 partners. And we realized, and we were adding at a very healthy clip of about, one partner every week, sometimes even more. And that led to some very clear challenges. Part of the reason we were adding so many partners was everybody wanted to go become a digital technologist company and go deliver value to their customers, which is great. But I think as a result of that, we realized that we're not being very meaningful to our partners and going deep and wide versus just spraying ourselves with our partners. So we took a very strategic vertical approach. We said partners that are very dominant in certain verticals are the ones that will go deep dive and go co-create some of these assets that will deliver specific outcomes. So overall equipment efficiency, equipment effectiveness, solutions for manufacturing, industrial automation. We went in and actually towards Siddharth's point, we went to actually build shop floor apps with partners that were actually dominant in industrial automation on the shop floor. Interestingly, some of the vertical solutions that we deployed for oil and gas went and delivered 8% improvement in their delta margin of where they stood. So our strategy has been vertical focus. And that essentially differentiates how.
But in the context of, sorry to cut you in, but in the context of how technology blocks are evolving every day, right? How do you, at a scale that you operate, how do you take these tough calls of narrowing down focus on 2 or 3 partners or 2 or 3 categories, right? Because there's so much uncertainty in the market that it becomes a very difficult call to take, right? Yeah. That I will work with A set of partners and not work with B set of partners. How does that happen?
To be perfectly candid with you, it's not fully happened for us as yet. As far as our, it's probably happened for us very clearly on our CAD and our PLM business because those are legacy core technologies. They've been established much like in ERP, CRM, supply chain. But especially on the IoT side, on industrial automation and augmented virtual reality, the expanse is still coming to bear. And we're still, separating the wheat from the chaff, if you will. So there is a funnel that clearly we look at, and we know which partners that are dominant, which actually walk the talk and deliver. Right. And that's how we separate. Just to conclude, I think the journey is probably over. It's a long-range plan. By 2022, 23 is when we will really know where it lands across these 25 partners or 115 partners.
And before you chime in, Siddharth, one of the things we have observed specifically in the cloud and AI world, and to an extent even in the IoT world, when we look at companies like Google and Amazon and all the new guys in the so-called new guys in these domains, right? They've actually created a separate vehicle of partners which are born in digital, born in IoT, born in AI partners. And today, if you look at their ecosystem, it's buzzing with those partners. So when you think of companies like Oracle, where you have had the legacy of carrying so many partners, and there are these new companies, so to speak, who are taking a very different approach to building that ecosystem, how do you balance it out from a competition standpoint, from an Oracle perspective?
Yeah, so I'll answer that, but just quickly on co-creation. One of the things that, we've gone from being a Boeing that builds airplanes and gives it to airlines like United or Lufthansa, whatever,
right,
to being the airline too. So we've had to change the culture, because there you have to make the customer successful. They have to feel like they got value, otherwise they won't come back.
Right.
And so in the co-creation sense, what we've said is we're not going to launch a single cloud service unless we have customers live on that cloud service. So what that means is that we have to start the early adoption and the co-innovation a lot earlier, including customers, so that they are looking at it, they have a use case, they are actually willing to go experiment with it, give us feedback. We'll change the roadmap, because we're releasing 3 to 4 times a year. So the roadmaps are relatively short. We'll change the roadmap for them. And when we go live, we will have a number of customers that can stand with us and say, we're actually live and we're actually delivering, leveraging the platform and getting value from the platform. So that is part of that co-creation thing where, we haven't necessarily thought out everything ourselves. And we by putting that mantra saying you're not going to launch unless you have a customer live, that has forced that co-creation to happen, right? And then in terms of partners, how we decide which partners to work with, and we have, 5,000 ISVs.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't, and in the cloud, they were all embedding the database. But in the cloud, now you're looking at compute network infrastructure. All the ISVs are going from on-prem software to now delivering SaaS, right? They want to deliver SaaS software in a multi-tenant fashion. So how do we help them build that? So we've looked at 2 vectors. One is revenue. How much revenue do these people have? How many customers do they have? How much revenue do they bring to us? So that's been one slice of looking at it. And the second is, what is the most innovation that is being brought in? Meaning, what is the most differentiated offerings that they're delivering? And then we'll partner with them to help them, right? So those are 2.
But how open are, and I'll come to Susheela in a moment, but how open are companies imagining that partners of today and technologies of today could look very different from partners of tomorrow and technologies of tomorrow, right? So how does that transition happen at a large organization like Oracle? Would be interesting to sort of understand as well.
A transition for the partner or for us?
For the company to take these bets rapidly on the partners, to say, look, today Mr. A was important, tomorrow Mr. B will become important.
Well, I think that just as our cloud services are evolving rapidly, if we don't see the partner evolving rapidly, they're done, right?
Okay.
So we work very closely with the partners, we help the partners, and we want to see progress both in terms of them getting to market and 2, them generating bookings or revenue both for themselves and then for us. And if you don't make it on that train, then we'll just cycle through.
So it's tracked and KPI and things like that. Okay.
Yes.
From your perspective, Susheela, you've been helping companies, as I mentioned earlier. What are some of the challenges that you have addressed for your customers, and what are the challenges that are still unaddressed, in large parts, as customers think of creating their own platforms, creating their own ecosystems, and so on and so forth?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest challenges we see are what we've already talked about a little bit, is really having CEO alignment, having that C-suite, and of course resourcing, which we can help with. But the third major challenge that we see is change management. Mm-hmm. Implementing and going down this new path that really changes how you're interacting with customers, how you're interacting with partners, how you're interacting among employees, and enabling employees, really requires a significant amount of communication, training, and a lot of resources really dedicated to the change management piece, which we see a lot of companies not really recognizing, and thinking that you can launch this new platform, this new capability, whether it's for customers or employees, but not also running at the same time as the whole technology development is the change management aspect to it. So,
if I could piggyback on that. I couldn't agree more. Because just as a real breathing example, we are still going through a transformation I know every company in the world is. But one of the things that we recognized was, A, it's a marathon, not a sprint. B, it's going to hit troughs of disillusionment and despair.
Right.
So the only way to kind of make your way through it was to have a very programmatic approach, right? So you've got the vision, you've got the strategy, and then you got a plan, and then you need a programmatic framework. So what we did was we made a 2-year journey, 6-month phases, 4 phases, 8-week sprints in each phase. So we truly embraced one, agile, keeping agile in the context of the bigger transformation.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't get outcomes every 8 weeks, then most transformations fail, because then the fatigue sets in,
Right.
and disillusionment sets in. So having sort of that type of framework really allowed us to kind of push through the downs and keep pushing towards the goals.
So what is the outcomes for the company, right? But as you build the ecosystems, you have partners, you have ISVs, you have developers, you have even customers co-create for you, right? As a platform orchestrator, how do you think of outcomes for all participating entities, right? And how do, in fact, the definition of outcomes, is that changing, is that very different for all constituents of the ecosystem? Good to understand as well.
Yeah, so I mean, the world is, moving. I call it outcomes as a service,
Mm-hmm.
and outcomes are in the eyes of the beholder, right? So, as an example, if we sell earth movers today for many $1 million a piece, that market could be disrupted tomorrow if a competitor says that I'm going to sell it as cubic feet of earth moved a week. Right? So the moment they say that, you need to be a digital business in order to be able to measure, dirt
Right.
moved, to monitor it, to bill like that.
But
to
how
collect
easy or
like-
difficult is that to measure the outcomes?
Yeah,
at that
and
level?
that's really the hard part. So when you envision your platform,
Yeah.
you have to really start there, because if you don't start there, you may design a platform that's actually going to be hitting a brick wall in about
Absolutely.
6 months after,
Yeah.
right? So that sort of, you have to layer, so that upfront visioning session for outcomes and KPIs is where you start actually.
Right.
Before you do anything, before you write a line of code, you got to do that.
Okay.
Because that really then percolates into every aspect of what you do.
Yeah.
From your perspective.
Yeah, outcomes is really important for us in our business, and one of the things we've done is we're building a database of outcomes. We've done over 1,400 projects, and a lot of them are similar recommendation engines or churn predicting type of products or community building, customer experience. And we start with each project where we really identify and have, work with our customers to identify what the business outcome. But we can map that to our business outcomes database to say, well, here is the average for the retail industry in terms of, recommendation engine, what kind of engagement you get, what kind of conversion you get. So that really helps our customers benchmark where they are, not just vis-a-vis where they were before, but vis-a-vis where they are in terms of an industry average. So that's a really important
So
thing
just
that
peg
we're-
it to the industry.
Yeah, and I think that, when you asked about, the different aspects in the people in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So we look at it as, for example, if I just take an ISV who's trying to build a SaaS application, what do they need to be able to do? Other than write their code, they need to be able to provide capabilities to integrate their SaaS application with other SaaS and on-prem applications. They need to be able to give their customers the ability to extend that SaaS application,
Right.
because they'll never come up with all the capabilities that are needed. They need to be able to give single sign-on across, that SaaS application and other parts of the ecosystem, and they need analytics so they can blend data that's inside their application and outside. So we look at it as, how can we deliver these capabilities to them outside of just giving them the ability to write code on the platform, right? Because we think of it as, we don't want to drop people into this chef's kitchen, professional chef's kitchen, with 5,000 really amazing, tools and things that you could use, because we're not all professional chefs. So we want to give them these higher level capabilities that enable them to build a SaaS application. Similarly, for SIs, we think differently. For developers, we think differently. How can we have them embed artificial intelligence into their applications such that they can make their application that more predictive for their business users?
Right.
So thinking differently about each of these constituents and think about what we need to enable them to do for their customers.
Right. So building on that, Ravi, and you are in one of those industries which has talked about outcomes way more than anyone else has, right? So when you think of outcomes and when you think of these constituents in the ecosystem, how critical is the alignment on outcomes? In fact, in your case, when GSIs work with customers, their commitment to outcomes versus, PTC's commitment to outcomes to either partners or customers might vary, right? So how do you find the balance between the two, and what do you do as a OEM to enable the outcomes throughout the customer journey? Will be good to understand as well.
Sure, yeah. So there is a Russian proverb which says, if you chase two rabbits, you're not going to get either one of them. Which essentially means that if your objective, if you're a rabbit, or if your one thing is the outcome, and we love outcome-based conversations from an IoT AR standpoint, because if you don't have an outcome-based conversation right at the beginning, they get into pilots and then become pilot purgatory zone, and you never see those. The first value is not seen, and if you don't see first value, then you don't do scale. So for us, when we have conversations with our partners as well as customers, we like, what's your rabbit? Which rabbit are you chasing, and what's that outcome? 3 examples I'll quickly give you, it's very succinctly. For a major CPG soda and chips manufacturer in Texas, we actually helped them using their OEE models as overall equipment effectiveness. We helped them improve that's the 8% example that I was giving you,
right.
Or 8 to 10%. For another CPG manufacturer, the outcome was we want to improve the beat or for the tricycle that takes the ice creams. We want to make sure that they stay within geospatial, they don't deviate from that route. And how do you improve sales effectiveness there? So improving 10 to 15% in that route was very important for them.
But the problem there, Ravi, is a lot of times when you talk to partners, they come back and cite this issue that the moment there are outcomes, customers take a step back in paying for outcomes. They want to fall back onto
I agree
classic
with you.
Models and things like that.
I completely agree with you. So I think one is having an outcome-based conversation, and one is paying for outcomes. I think customers are very savvy.
Yeah.
They know the fact that if they sign up for an outcome-based, and if this becomes a runaway success, can you imagine the drain on their bank?
Exactly.
Because suddenly they've signed up for outcome, which is why you've seen that traditionally worldwide, whether it is ERPs, cloud, supply chain, AI, or ML, or you see outcome-based conversations, but your compensation or monetization as a service provider, as an SI or us as a company, is typically not based on outcome.
Perfect.
So that's our realization. So, but having an outcome conversation, one last thought I'll share this with you. For a truck manufacturer, for a tire manufacturer company, their rabbit to chase or their outcome, one thing was we want to reduce the cost of manufacturing the tire. And we don't know what it's going to be, but we hope that by adopting some of these IoT elements that you're bringing to bear, you'll help us reduce that. We went in with only that objective, not knowing what the number is. And finally, we saved them $1. So is it great? No. Is it a beginning? Yes, it's a beginning. We saved you $1 for every tire that you manufacture on your line that creates the tires.
Perfect.
So.
Great. So before we wind down, very quickly, 2 pieces of advice to people who are thinking about evolving and scaling the ecosystems around platforms.
Be brave, and really just commit to the outcomes, right? Be brave and commit to the outcomes, and you will be successful. So just there will be lots of things thrown at you, but keep that focus, keep the end goal in sight, and push through it. It's not a journey for the weak-hearted.
Right.
Yeah.
Your perspective.
Besides outcomes, I think alignment, not just with the C-suite, but alignment across different teams, making sure there's clarity on roles and how the different groups and teams will be contributing to the outcomes.
Siddhartha?
Yeah, I would say that move up the value chain as much as you can. So rather than, for example, providing Spark as a service or Kafka as a service, provide data integration as a service that enables business users to actually do digital transformations of data as it's going in. So the ETL is not about the low-level Spark, Kafka processing, but at higher levels. So the higher you go, I think the more attach you get from the business users. And the second thing I would say is really you have to change your sales team's culture, because the sales teams are very much today thinking about feature, functionality, and technical selling. But more and more, the decisions being made are being made by the line of business, and they have the budget, and the sales teams don't yet know how to talk the language of the business user or the use cases or the value proposition for the business user. So those are two things, and your platform then just evolves to deliver to that.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'll just add to this by saying, I think platformization or building platforms is a team sport. If you find the one thing, like for example, Amit Fadnis spoke about Edison, the one thing, the one rabbit that is your sweet spot and is dominant, use the teams around you to go build that and go execute to success.
Right. Do we have time for questions, or any questions from the audience? Okay. If there's no questions, then we'll wind it up. But I think it's a very interesting conversation. I think the catchwords I learned was most successful platforms unlock value from the domain. They are built on external and internal ecosystems. They are autonomous and AI-driven, and they ride on innovative, creative business models. So the idea for everyone is to be brave, just focus on it, build the right culture, and play it like a team sport. And that's when the success will start showing up. Thank you so much.
Co-create with customers.
Sorry?
And co-create.
And co-create with customers, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Praveen.